Welcome back to CHGO Bears After Dark, presented by ComEd here, as we are always keeping the lights on here at ComEd. We're doing our thing here once again. It was a late night last night, so shout out to ComEd for helping us keep the lights on as always. It's a late night here at CHGO Bears. 2 post-game shows back-to-back last night, and we are just continuing to roll things along. So we're back and better than ever. Corey Wooten just got off work here. I've been dialing away, trying to roll out these clips and all these hot takes on a hot take Monday. Not a victory Monday, but it certainly has become somewhat of a victory lap Monday, Corey, for those that are now feeling a sense of vindication, whether you're somebody who thought the Bears should have never gotten rid of Fields, or that you thought that Fields was never the core issue, that Justin Fields was burdened by bad play calling and a bad offensive line and no structure, no system, no continuity, no consistency. And now you have the number 1 pick, a generational talent, as he was dubbed, coming in and living the same kind of struggles we saw with Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields. And you even had a guy like Todd McShay. I just watched a clip of his where he asked the question. He goes, would this have been how Patrick Mahomes would have looked if he had been drafted in a Chicago Bears uniform? And, you know, it at the end of the day, it may be a nauseating conversation for some that we thought was dead and buried, but here it is staring us right in the face. And at the end of the day, you got to accept the reality that's right in front of you. And right now, the Bears meet the new Bears, same as the old Bears. They got a lot of work to do to clean things up.
Yeah, it's tough, Braggs, because, you know, everyone that's watched, I was a big Justin Fields fan. I thought he had talent. I thought, yes, he had some flaws. But I really thought this offensive line had a lot of issues. I've always been a big proponent on the trenches. You know my philosophy, right? Really build through the trenches. I think that's how you win games, is when you win the trench battle. And Houston did that on the defensive side of the ball. I thought our defense played well. You know, the bend but don't break. But when we needed big plays, we came up. It's just very frustrating because you have your quarterback, Caleb Williams, that's very talented, and he's running for his life. It reminded me a lot of that Cleveland game back when Justin Fields first came in, when Andy Dalton was starter. And then all of a sudden, Justin Fields comes in and he gets sacked 9 times. This game felt a lot like that. And you never want your quarterback to, when you're growing and developing a quarterback, you never want to put him through a situation like that. You know, I think Caleb has all the talent in the world, but they have to figure out this offensive line situation. And there's not much you can do right now, but game plan, right? You can game plan around what you got going. We might have to go old school smash mouth football right now, under center, 2 tight ends, run in between the tackles, set up the play action at this point, because, Braggs, what we saw yesterday was awful. Like that was one of the worst offensive line performances I've seen in a long time. Just simple games, being able to pass them out. And then Darnell Wright simply whiffing. You know, when the game's on the line, when you have that big drive, like whiffing on Danielle Hunter. It wasn't like Danielle Hunter made a crazy move. He's made an in-out move, you know, out, and he whiffed on him and got Caleb destroyed. And your first round pick, I know Danielle Hunter is a talented pass rusher, but when the game's on the line, you cannot whiff like that in that situation. Yeah, it's just frustrating, because if he couldn't scramble, they probably would have had 12 sacks in that game. Yep. He eluded probably 5 sacks where you're like, wow, he made these elusive plays to get out and get to the line of scrimmage or throw it out. But his confidence, that's the only thing I worry about, is a young quarterback, when you're developing him, getting him going, is you don't want to break his confidence at all. Not saying that's the case, but he looked defeated out there, as if anybody would. Yep. You get hit, you get sacked that many times, they're in your face all the time. It's going to be tough to play for any quarterback out there. And I think that's been the history of the Bears, the offensive line has always been the weak spot. The defensive line has always been the bright spot. Now we have weapons. We can't utilize them because of the offensive line. So, yes, Caleb has to make better decisions, but people that are saying, they're giving up on him, you're crazy for that. It's the second game in the NFL. There is a learning curve. It's definitely I don't think anyone saw it being this bad offensively, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. So I'm just hoping this week that we see some adjustments, because if not, I'm going to be worried, honestly, about this season and Caleb's development.
Well, I mean, that's the question, because I had another point I wanted to make, but since you went there about being worried where your threshold is, I mean, you got the Colts coming up. Anthony Richardson did not look good against a good Packers team, whether they had their starting quarterback or not. Packers have a foundation and a philosophy, and they beat the brakes off the Colts without Jordan Love. And then, Bears take on the Colts in Indy next week, and then the week after that, they're at home against the Rams, who have a litany of injuries. Well, they're going to have 6-7 guys out, including Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp in that game at home. Then you have the Panthers at home. And, at this point, the way they played the first 2 weeks, you're sitting here going there's no way they're going to win all 3 of these games. But at the same time, on paper, and a reasonable expectation of these games is that they really should win them. I obviously anything can happen. And I know the Colts and Rams and the Panthers are all going to be dialing up the blitz just the same, as we've seen here, the last couple of weeks, especially with the Texans dialing it up hot on Caleb Williams. But at the end of the day, the Bears got to make adjustments up front. And if they can hold the Texans, a high-powered offense, to 19 points, then they should be able to give these next few teams some problems too. And if the offense could just get their shit together, then maybe this team can string together some wins and build up some confidence. Because they didn't play well week 1, but everybody felt good because they came away with a win. They didn't play well week 2, and now you got some finger pointing going on. Bears Twitter is completely having a meltdown today, and nothing feels good because it's the
players, the post game about how the players were talking about the coaches and the game plan.
Tevin Jenkins, Braxton Jones, and DJ Moore all separately said at some point in the locker room that at the end of the day, we're just doing what the coaches are telling us to do. So that there is some underlining finger pointing going on there.
And then Eberflus kind of throwing Caleb under the bus a little bit in the post game. I mean, it is what it is, but he did. It's definitely concerning with all the camaraderie and everyone talking about how the chemistry of this team was. And I thought so. What you saw on Hard Knocks, it seemed genuine. It seemed like they really loved and care about each other. But the thing is, they have to realize that, listen, you're 1-1 at this point. As bad as you played offensively in both games, you are 1-1 at this point. There's no reason for them to go in panic mode. I am, just because the offense is, but there's no reason for them to at this point, because you flush it, you move on to this week. It's a very winnable game. But the thing is, Waldron has to be better about game planning for them. The offensive line is struggling now. How can you do things right? Can you keep an extra tight end in there? Can you keep 2 extra tight ends in there? Right. Can we do some hard play action plays where you give Caleb some time? Because as former defensive lineman, anytime somebody's under center with 2 tight ends and you do hard play action, that is the hardest to get a pass rush, especially if you're a 5 technique defensive end. Literally, you're going out there to play the run. All of a sudden, they clamp onto you. Then you have a tight end helping out. So these talented pass rushers, it's hard for them to get home in situations like that. So Waldron, I know that's not your bread and butter, but at this point, you have to make adjustments for the roster that you have. I think going forward, we know that the Bears have to address the offensive line. And I'm a firm believer in that. You look at some of the best teams usually have the best offensive line, like San Francisco for years. Even back in 2012 when I played, they had Joe Staley. They had Anthony who's the guy that played for Rutgers? Anthony Davis was a Pro Bowl level. Mike Iupati, Alex Boone. They had guys. And I remember playing them on Monday Night Football when Colin Kaepernick had his first game. And that was one of the toughest matchups. Like, they were going to run the ball down your throat and set the line of scrimmage. And that's what we're not seeing right now. If you can't set the tone for the game in the run game. Literally, it's going to be so hard, especially if you can't protect, to mix and match the run and pass. If you're getting a push in the run game and you're getting some steady yards, 5, 7, 9, break a big one, it's so much easier to set up the play action pass at that point.
Yep.
And right now, the Bears in that game, they were very one-dimensional. They tried to get things going, but everyone knew when the game, in that second half, that they were trying to pass the ball consistently. And my only thing was, it really wasn't that big of a deficit for them to just start passing the ball all the time. And I know, the runs aren't working, but why gun run in this day and age? Literally, it's the easiest thing to pick up. If the back's offset the one way, he's coming across the other way. He's going to go sideways to then go back up the field. I never understood that.
Yep.
If he's behind the quarterback, it's a run pass keys all day. So it's very predictable. And I just didn't understand why you make adjustments. You remember they're talking about, he's looking at his call sheet. No, you need to look at what's going on in the game and make adjustments out there. And that's the mark of a good coach. And who knows? It's only week 2, but maybe Jackson Smith and Jigba, that warning was everything we needed to know about Shane Waldron. I really thought, because studying him and what he did for Geno Smith and the season before Russell Wilson left, Russell Wilson had one of his best seasons in the NFL under Waldron, right? He's a Sean McVay disciple. He looked great. Geno Smith looked great. The offense was flowing. And then what we saw these past 2 weeks hasn't been good. So,
well, I think it's about identity, because Shane Waldron, I think Mercedes Lewis, when he came in, said that he swore off on Shane Waldron. He's like, this dude's a genius. And so that's great. I'm sure he is really smart. But this is a young team that needs to learn how to play with attitude. You got some guys in there, your former defensive line coach, Richard Hightower. You got that Chris Morton, Chad Morton. I always call him Chris Morgan, Chad Morton, Chad Morton, dialing everybody up. So you need some guys in there, Eric Washington, guys that are going to motivate these guys to play at a high level. Rod Marinelli, lighting a fire under your ass at once upon a time. And so you can have the quiet leader that's very smart and cerebral, but you also need some guys that are going to put that fire under people's belly. And so, Skokes is asking in the chat, what is the identity of this offense? And I think that's the biggest question that they've got to figure out, because, the thing that I always point to, it's not, you've heard polls say this too, it's not always about talent. The best offensive team I've ever seen the Bears implement was the 2013 Bears, who broke records across the board with Alshon, Brandon Marshall, Martellus Bennett, Jay Cutler, Matt Forte. But what you don't remember about that team is their offensive line. Jermon Bushrod came over from the Saints. Matt Slauson was their left guard, not a Pro Bowler. Roberto Garza at the age of 34. He's at the back end of his career. Great offensive lineman. They had him playing center too, by the way. And he had mostly been a guard most of his career. And then you had 2 rookies on the right side, Kyle Long and Jordan Mills. Guess how many games they played together? All 16 of them. That's an identity. They understood what they were doing and had the continuity to play with each other. And we've got a carousel going on with Nate Davis in the center position and now a new offensive system coming in here. And they don't know what their identity is. So I honestly, we were talking about this last night, and I still keep going back and forth. I see Coleman Shelton and Nate Davis getting whipped. But at the same time, I also am starting to think about the identity and how they want to execute an offense and how much that's affecting these guys to play at the top level they possibly can play at. So we've got some more thoughts on this. We're going to take a quick break, but I just wanted to make that point because Skokes brought up identity, and that's kind of the thing that I keep going back to. We want to talk about Caleb Williams and what he needs to get better at. We want to talk about making all these changes to the offensive line and talk about to me, it's about identity, and it's about the system and trying to figure out how you want to call a football game so these guys can start practicing how they want to execute it. They're not even there yet. They don't know how they want to call a football game yet. So how can you prepare week to week to come out the gates and know what you're doing?
Tell them, Braggs.
I'm going. Hey, I didn't play the game like you and Briggs and Brown. I certainly learn a lot from you guys, but I've seen enough to know what's right. And right now, I think we all can see you don't have to have been a former Chicago Bear to know it's not right. But I want to give a quick shout out here to my guys over at ComEd. It's getting easier to switch to electric vehicles. And that's something we can all get behind. For the health of the planet and for the well-being of all of us who share it, the electric grid is evolving to meet your cleaner energy needs. As we all move with confidence towards an electric tomorrow, whether you have one delivery van or a whole fleet of shipping trucks, ComEd can help guide you to make the changes that make sense. So what should business owners do? They should go to comed.com/clean to learn more about the resources, fleet rebates, and infrastructure incentives available to help businesses go electric. If you own a business, don't wait. Start making your plan today to switch to electric vehicles. Good for business, good for the planet, good for all of us. Go to comed.com/clean. Go now and see how going electric connects us to a better way of doing business and a better future for generations to come. I also want to give a quick shout out to our guys over at Joe's on Weed Street. We are going to be there here for a watch party on September 22nd, this Sunday, starting at 11 a.m. for a live pregame show. We're going to have live postgame show and then a live Briggs and Brown show. So Woot will be there. I'll be there. Alex Brown, Lance Briggs, Adam Hogue, Mark Carmen, the whole CHGO Bears gang, probably a lot of guys from some of the other CHGO Bears teams. That'll be presented by Miller Lite at Joe's on Weed Street. $10 general admission ticket, but you can also get ticket packages that include all you can drink throughout the game as we watch the Bears take on the Colts. So make sure you go to allchgo.com/events to get your tickets. And if you become a diehard at allchgo.com/diehard, you can get a discount on that event and get a free shirt like our Claws Up shirt that we just released here recently. You get that shirt for free, discount on the event. Come hang out and watch the Bears win a football game. Watch some live post-game coverage, pre-game coverage, everything in between. That's what we do here at CHGO Sports. We're with you guys, the fans. So, Corey, before our guy Adam Rank joins us, I know he's doing a spot, with another radio outlet, and then he's going to jump on as soon as he's finished. But to my point a little bit about identity and, the consistency of the offensive line. We're talking a lot last night, and now that you've kind of let the dust settle, we've talked about Nate Davis. I think I fired him last night. We talk about Coleman Shelton. Are there changes that you want to make to the offensive line? Are you staying put and just kind of giving these guys an opportunity at least one more week to get on the same page? Where's your mindset at on trying to find the identity of this offense?
I think they have to make a switch on the guard positions. I think Tevin Jenkins got to go back to right. I like Hogue's idea about moving him on the right side. I think that would be good with him and Darnell Wright because they're our best run blockers, the combo right there. I think you got to get Bates involved. I just don't know if they have the fight. Like Bill Murray, you got to give him a shot. Like I don't care who it is. What we saw yesterday, especially from Nate Davis, from an effort standpoint, that's the most concerning to me. That's why I think he cannot be on there. And I hate to call for somebody's job, but Braggs, what we saw out there was just loafing. There was no effort. He didn't care. And this is a guy that I watched his film when he was in Tennessee. He was a road grader. He was a good pass protector, cared. And it seems like right now he does not care about football. I don't want to speak for him, but what we see out there with this effort, his attitude, and you hit the nail on the head when you were talking about the offensive line and back in like 06 and 13, especially 06 when Thomas Jones was on there with Cedric Benson. They had guys, was it Reuben Brown? Was it John Tate? They had legit
Roberto Garza,
Olin
and then who was our guy that would talk about Space Mountain? He dubbed that season Space Mountain. Name will come to me. It's been 20 years, so forgive me.
Yeah, but they had guys that were aggressive, that set the tone, that were nasty. And what I see is Tevin Jenkins, to me, was the nastiest offensive guy. How many times have we seen him finishing somebody downfield, right? How many times have we seen him blocking somebody to the whistle? We haven't seen that.
Yeah, not enough.
He's a guy that consistently has done that over the course of the last 3 years, and we're just not seeing enough of that. so that your nastiest guy isn't nasty, I think that's indicative of your coaching. And I always bring up this example because sometimes when you change coaches, right, you change a coaching staff, like just like 2012 to 2013, we keep the defense the same with the exception of Urlacher, right?
Right.
Big loss in Urlacher, but towards the end of his career, literally from Rod Marinelli and Lovie Smith to Mel Tucker, we went from top 5 to dead last in every category. Why is that? Because stuff crept in. Like, remember that 2013 game with Aaron Rodgers at the end of the season? Whoever won that game went into the playoffs.
Yep.
Remember there was a ball on the ground, and we just left it there. Nobody scooped and scored it. It actually was a fumble, and nobody picked it up in that game. That would have been a game changer. But that's something that crept in that never would have happened under Lovie Smith and Rod Marinelli. And that's the thing. Like, people think just because you're pros, you're going to go out there and you're going to do your best. No, there's something about coaches. Dan Campbell, why do you think he's got Detroit ready to go? Right, attitude. They got talent. Don't get me wrong.
Attitude, identity.
You gotta want to run through a brick wall for these coaches, and I don't know if I get that vibe. I don't,
right.
especially the past 2 weeks. What we saw in preseason and Hard Knocks, literally, like I'm like, oh, this is gonna be the year. Everything's looking good. Was it a facade?
Yeah.
Was this fake? Was it fake I don't know.
Right. Well, they didn't show the trenches in Hard Knocks. They left the O-line and the D-line out, but we're not going to leave out our guy, Adam Rank, who joins us once again here on CHGO Bears After Dark, as he always does here on his Monday spot. How we doing tonight, Adam? Because we're kind of licking our wounds and trying to assess the damage. And so everybody's kind of asking themselves, is it time to panic? Are you there yet with the Chicago Bears offense in your panic mode? Where's your meter at right now?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on again. I thought about, because with everything that was going on, I was maybe not going to be able to come on tonight, but I'm like, you know what? I want to give Braggs his opportunity to gloat, to tell me how right he was picking against the Bears. Oh, I hope it felt good. You picked the Texans to win. That's where it comes. That's the attitude. That's what I'm talking about. It stems from the fans.
You're blaming me now.
Turning our back, when we start conceding games to the, listen, we can sit here and be like, it's a 12-5 team. It's a 10-7 team, whatever it is. In the week of, we cannot have that mentality of like, we might lose this game. Again, big picture. Are we gonna sweep Green Bay? I mean, like, in a big picture sense, probably not. But I'll tell you, in week 11, when we're lined up against the Packers, I'm picking the Bears. And you'll be like, you pick the Bears every week. I'm like, yeah, because I don't want to ever concede anything. And I don't want that kind of attitude creeping in. So
hold the line.
I will say this. The funniest thing is like, I should be able to panic. Of everybody in the world today, I should be the only one allowed to panic because I was the only one who believed in the Bears to win that game. The rest of you didn't believe. You were like, we're going to lose. So you got what you wanted. I did not. And I even foolishly sat there after Caleb hit Rome for that big play in the 2-minute drill. I'm like, oh my God, we might pull this off. And I remember saying to myself, like, it's going to be like, I was just saying, I'm going to be such a menace to people. I think that the football gods were like, you know what? Like, we can't give this one to Rank because that's too much, because he'll be too out of control. He won't be able to contain himself, and he's going to say something to somebody and be suspended. So I get it. But, ultimately, as I sit here and look at this objectively, and I was privileged enough to listen to most of your conversation here. It's like, the offensive line needs to play better. Caleb needs to play better. People need to play better. I just want to see what happens when we play the Colts, who are not a pushover by any sense of the imagination. The Rams will be, because they're going to mail it in. Jeff Manns was talking about it today on SiriusXM. Like, when the Rams get into trouble, they're like, we're out. We're going to cash this one in. Cooper Kupp can't play. Okay, we might as well quit. But I want to see, because I really, truly believe the Bears have a chance to be in 3-1 through the first quarter of the season. And if we come back and rebound and everything like that, I think, we'll be feeling okay. I do know that, the Washington fans are getting a little wind in their jaw They're like, oh, Jaden Daniels looks so much better. I'm like, you know what? Terry McLaurin hasn't had more than 25 receiving yards this season. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit. And by the way, when you're playing the Giants, you better look good. Like, that would have been concerning. But yeah, I'm not an irrational person. I expect better out of the offensive line and Caleb accordingly.
Yeah. So what for you, when you look at that, especially we were talking about Nate Davis, what are your thoughts from what you've seen the past 2 weeks, kind of from last year as well? This is kind of carrying over into this year. Do you think they need to make a change at right guard at this point from the effort standpoint, from what we're seeing from him?
Yeah. I mean, I would have the same issue with somebody who is playing AYSO U10. Like, hey, if you don't want to be out here, that's fine. Like, but don't waste my time. Like, I'm sure you've got a lot of guarantees in your contract that will pay you. But if you don't want to be out on this football field, that's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings. You got to find that in yourself. And I think it's up to the coaches, to start holding these players accountable. Don't go into the press conference and say, like, I want to see more. Because, like, that's the one thing that I liked was that during the training camp and stuff is that it felt like Matt Eberflus was kind of putting his feet to the fire. And maybe he's kind of forced into this position because Patrick Bates is injured. It's kind of like that scene in the program where James Conn does not like the backup quarterback. But then when Rick Kane checks himself into rehab, he's like, oh, crap, I got to start this guy. Like, it feels like that kind of thing. Like, I would have loved to have cut this guy a month ago. I might be forced into playing him. So, but I think that we need to start being a little bit more proactive. And I don't think it's too early to think about last season. And defensively, you came out of training camp. Like, obviously, Ryan Poles went out there, made a couple of draft picks that he hoped would contribute right away. They were not. It was evident that they needed something else. And they're like, okay, well, I'm going to make a trade for Montez Sweat. There needs to be, and I don't think it's a panic move to say this, but like there needs to be a Montez Sweat level trade on the offensive line. I don't care what it is. I don't know what I can't even fathom of what it is. And I'll let Ryan Poles go out and do his job. But I think that needs to be done because I think everybody's done with what's going on with Nate Davis.
Don't you think from an offensive line standpoint, you don't see these like monster trades by the deadline? It's usually maybe something in the offseason just because once you got your starters and you feel decent about somebody, it's so hard to find good offensive linemen. I feel like you can find pass rushers sometimes. Rod Marinelli always used to say that. I can find pass rushers on the street. I can find guys that can play. But I think offensive line, that's why you see in the draft, like some teams really try to get the offensive line going. Because I'm a firm believer in it. I think it's one in the trenches. Obviously, I think you got to have some skill at wide receiver, running back. But if you can control the line of scrimmage on either side of the ball, you're more likely to win. San Francisco, they've done that for years, back to Harbaugh, even back to their days of winning Super Bowls with Joe Montana and company. You win the battle in the trenches. The Tom Brady killers, the New York Giants, right? Like, look what they did.
Yeah.
They had a great offensive line, great defensive line in both of those to be able to win. So I think, looking back on it, right, I think Rome was a good pick, but in the back of my mind, I always had like, man, maybe we should revamp this offensive line. But I think Poles just felt so good, especially about Braxton Jones, and that's his guy, and he found this steal. And, Tevin Jenkins, this has been kind of a surprise for me. But Nate Davis, right. I mean, I thought he'd bounce back this year. I thought, hey, he lost his mom last year. He's going through a lot. Maybe he'll be ready to go this year. It just doesn't seem like he's all there. And, the center position definitely need to address that this offseason. So I think you can have all the weapons in the world, but if you can't protect, you can't run the football, it's irrelevant.
Well, they had an opportunity to cut bait with Nate Davis in the training camp, but I felt like Matt Eberflus was this close to doing it multiple times, and then they chose not to. I think out of necessity, because as you said with your program, analogy that it's a lack of options, and they have some injuries. They had injuries at camp. Ryan Bates gets hurt. Coleman Shelton and him are trying to figure out the center position. Kieran Amagaji, I think, eventually will be an option one day, but he's a rookie offensive lineman project, so he's not necessarily there yet. But to your point, Corey picking up somebody, he picked up Claypool 2 years ago to try to help his quarterback, have a wide receiver in that room, and Chase Claypool didn't work out well, but he did try to upgrade the room to help his quarterback. Last year, defensive line needed a boost, so he went ahead and did that. Now, you also look at, in terms of cutting a guy, last year, second week into the season, they cut ties with Chase Claypool. They said, we're going to just get ahead of this, and this was a mistake. And I think they're starting to get down that road here with Nate Davis. And I think if it wasn't for the fact that Ryan Bates was injured, I think a move like that might even have been made this week. So I just don't know. But Adam, I guess my next question to you is, keeping this on a Bears focus, but also just from a fantasy perspective too. We had a lot of conversations about who could be, a good fantasy option for the Chicago Bears. And DeAndre Swift was a name a lot of us, I think, were very high on to have a huge year. The Bears were like hiding him in preseason games. He looked great at training camp. And at this point, the run game has been non-existent. I know you were also big on the idea that Rome Odunze by the end of the year could kind of be a guy that could win your fantasy championship and get you through the playoffs as a red zone guy that's kind of starting to figure things out later in the year. He drops a touchdown. So, where are you at now with the offensive skill guys on this and trying to figure out, who just from a Bears perspective, like options of guys to get better, but then also for people to like help them out, because I'm sure there's a bit of a panic button going on with some fantasy football managers right now too.
Yeah, if you go, I know nobody's going to go back and watch this, but there was an episode of NFL Fantasy Live where I said that Rome Odunze will at one point be the most dropped player in the NFL, like in NFL fantasy, because it's going to be a rough go for him to get started just because there's better options just at this point of the season. Not anticipating him, not hauling in what would have been a difficult catch in the end zone right there. And I still truly believe that Rome Odunze will eventually find his footing and get going. And I think the stretch of those games, when we look at the schedule right now and you start thinking about some of these teams we're playing now, obviously New England's playing a lot better than we anticipated. But some of those teams, I don't think the Rams are going to be, the Rams are not what we thought they were going to be. The Jacksonville Jaguars are not what we thought they were going to be. So there's some opportunity right there for this team to get healthy and this team to get right. I mean, we've seen it before where we've seen the reverse, where this team has started off like 5-1 and then everything gets worse. You just have to look back to last season and see what the Bears went through struggling early on before they all started to put it together. Hell, just look at what Houston did last year. There was nobody in the first 5 weeks of the season who were sitting there taking victory laps about CJ Stroud. Like nobody was like, hey, the Texans have found their answer at quarterback. Things were still up in the air. Hell, even Jordan Love. I mean, go look at what Jordan Love did in the first half of last season.
Right.
People were ready to turn the page on him, saying, hey, the Packers have they've run out of luck. They might have to go out there and find a quarterback outside of the family. I remember a conversation, I think it was on NFL Total Access, or maybe it would have been one of the other shows, where people are like, would they go after Kirk Cousins if he becomes a free agent type of thing? And it's like, things change pretty quickly in this league, which is why I'm not going to set into panic, and I'm going to let everybody go out there and make their memes and have their fun, because it's exactly what happens all the time, and nobody's accountable. Like I go back, and I don't know, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but also not avoiding patting myself on the back, is I put out in the spring that Rashid Shaheed is going to be amazing, and you're going to want him on your fantasy team. And the haters come out and they're like, do the opposite of what Rank says, blah, blah, blah. And okay. So now I'm going back to those posts and doing a little waving my hand emoji. And they're like, oh, look at you crying now. Like, I'm like, no, there's just no accountability. Like you'll never come back and be like, you might have nailed that one. So I will let everybody have their fun right now and go do their thing, because I think it will get better. I will, though, concede that the DeAndre Swift thing concerns me, because I think, again, it goes back to the offensive line, because you can't run. Like there was an inability to run inside. Week 1, you kind of brushed it off because the Titans have a very good defensive tackle combination. The Texans are built on the outside, but still it felt like they were running at the guys. Like, no, you don't need to run at, Will Anderson. You can try to avoid him. I mean, I don't know. Wouldn't necessarily want to go after him. I think some of that scheme wise. So I don't know. I feel like they got to start figuring out what they want to do as a team. Now you talk about the identity and like, hey, let's be tougher and everything like that, which I get, but it's like, we also need to start like focusing in on who the best players on the team are and getting the ball into their hands. Cole Kmet gets knocked silly and still holds on to the ball. Like, that's the player I want to feed. Like, that's a guy who's tough as nails. Like, force him the ball. Like, do this. God bless DeAndre Carter. But it's like, hey, you know what? Go out there and just get it to your best players and see what they can do. I remember in the preseason, when they were struggling to find something, they ran a reverse to Roma Dunze. And now he might not be able to do that right now because of everything that's going on with his knee. But it's like, get a little bit more creative and do something. So the fantasy wise, I think Roma will eventually be okay. I hope they figure out the rushing attack because Kenny Walker did do pretty well. And I'll probably go back at some point this evening and look at Seattle. And I don't recall Kenneth Walker starting off great last year, but actually finishing pretty well. So we'll see what happens. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that'll get changed around as the schedule softens up a little bit.
Well, look at the Bears, Corey. I mean, last year they started 0-4. They cut Chase Claypool week 2. There's mysterious firings of assistant coordinators in week 3. Justin Fields calls out the coaching staff and then has to retract it. And then the Chiefs beat the Bears by 50 while Taylor Swift is dancing on our graves. And then in week 4, they're up 28-7 on the Broncos and they blow that game. And all hell was breaking loose. And maybe if not for the short week last year from that week 4 to week 5 against Washington, some of these coaches might have been sent their walking papers. Instead, they beat the Commanders on Thursday Night Football. The offense breaks out, and then all of a sudden the Bears finish 7-6 on the year after an 0-4 start, and they did find their footing. So when you're looking for examples of teams that figured it out, the Bears are actually one of those teams too. And I also think that they're obviously way ahead of where they were last year defensively at this time. And so if you're looking for silver linings and looking for, a beacon of hope that they can kind of replicate what they did last year, but be slightly better, which could get them to 8, 9, maybe even 10 wins. Now I'm getting greedy with the way things are looking, but at the same time, I think those are still attainable goals if the offense can find their footing. And I mean, right now, Corey.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And when I'm looking at getting the run game going, you got arguably the best blocking tight end of all time in Mercedes Lewis. Why not bring him in there? Bring Cole Kmet, especially now with the offensive line struggles. Go 2 tight end sets under center. Bring Blasingame in there. Smash mouth football, right? Run the ball. Set the identity. Work the play action off it until you feel comfortable. Because at this point, the gun runs, Adam, as a former defensive lineman, you know exactly what's going on. And literally the running back, especially on 3rd and short, he's going sideways to then go forward. I just never understood that in 3rd and short, 2nd and short situations. You're literally going sideways to go forward. And literally the running back's behind the quarterback, it tips it off every time. So there's no disguising the run and pass. When you're under center, literally it's the hardest thing to react to a play action pass. Because you're going there to play the run, then all of a sudden they clamp you up. Then you got to work around a tight end, potentially a guard if you're inside as well. So it's so much tougher of a transition. And playing, Jim Harbaugh's offense back in 2012 when Colin Kaepernick went off on us on that Monday Night Football. Literally, that was the worst game of my life. We got our asses kicked every sense of the game. Run game, Frank Gore ran all over us. Literally, they controlled the line of scrimmage. We didn't have an answer. We didn't have any pressures, no sacks. It was tough sledding. The Bears, they have to get something similar to that. I don't know if that's going to be able to be attainable, but maybe you can do the outside zone stretches with Mercedes Lewis. Cole Kmet's a good blocker as well. I know he didn't have his best game, but I think you got to exploit some of your best options offensively when you look at the tight end position. So I would like to see some more Mercedes Lewis in there, maybe even in passing situations as well. He's an extra offensive lineman. You talk about helping that offensive line. I think that's a temporary solution right now to get things going and get the run game going. And then all of a sudden, who knows, maybe that'll open up things. Maybe it'll give the offensive line more confidence, and it'll just give a change of pace for that defense you're going against.
Yeah,
I agree with all that. I mean, I was even saying last week about getting Mercedes Lewis more involved and Cole Kmet. And Cole Kmet gives you the duality of it not being a tip-off of which way you're going. Because in some sets, you're like, okay, they're obviously running here. But even then, like, we should be at the point, or teams should be at the point, because the Chargers aren't mistaking what they're doing. And I know that they've played some teams like the Raiders and Carolina Panthers, so it feels really good right now. We'll see what happens when they go to Pittsburgh. But at the same time, it's like if you have a team that is imposing their will, and you know this as well as anybody, just from the story you were telling about Harbaugh's 49ers back in the day, like it's a very difficult thing to stop. And then if you have to worry about the run game, and then there's DJ Moore, and hopefully Keenan Allen will return, and you're able to beat them that way as well. I mean, that's the prescription for the Bears. I know that we want to wake up in a modern offense, but it all stems from that. And I don't know. It's just frustrating. That's the one thing I would love to see a little bit more of. Like if we were running more and kind of not trying to put Caleb in harm's way all the time. Like even if it's like boring football, because you see what happens with this defense is they give up a little bit in the first half. And somebody will get a pop play. 2 weeks ago, it was Chigakonkwo catching a dart from Will Levis. Nico Collins gets loose last night. And then after that, the Bears just clamped down. You're like, okay, we got it. We got the adjustment. And that's been really good. And I think that kind of goes under the radar. And then even if we're boring it up with running with a bunch of like two runs in a row, like 2 attempted smash mouth runs in a row. Okay, well, if it's 3rd and 8, it's better than 3rd and 12 because you were too predictable on 2nd down and got caught into a bad position. And just try running downhill. Like you should be able to hold the line of scrimmage. So right. I would like to see some more of that. And Eberflus, as a defensive guy, I think he needs to start saying like, look, okay, this is cute, but like let's establish something here and give Caleb some more comfort and support by getting these guys going downhill.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of this last year where the coaches would go to the podium and say, well, if the players just executed, then things this, and this will go right. And then the players are sitting there either publicly or privately going, yeah, well, we're not really running. It's square peg, round hole kind of thing going on here. And that's the thing that's most concerning is like, you're already kind of hearing some of that stuff. So at the end of the day, whatever your scheme wants to be, Shane Waldron, you got to do what's best for the team right now to get some positive momentum going. You certainly can't have your quarterback getting laid out time after time after snap like you saw last night, because he could have gotten hurt with the way he was taking a beating last night. But to your point, Adam, about the defense and the way they're really clamping down, man, and they came so close to at least 3 different turnovers. At the first play of the game, Jack Sanborn tips one up in the air. They almost get an interception right off the bat. Then, you have the Kyler Gordon near interception at one point. You had so many different opportunities. Then you had Montez Sweat where he tipped the ball straight in the air, and Billings and a few guys it was up there for a year, but unfortunately Mike Brown didn't come flying in for the pick 6 like we've seen once upon a time. But this defense is hunting, and if they have some of those breaks go their way, turnovers can be finicky in that way, but they're really going to put this team in a good position. So let's just hope some of those turnovers can happen earlier instead of later in the game, because I think that'll also help to the momentum of the team.
And, I also like the idea too, if you're moving the ball and you're running successfully and you pick up a first down, like you're starting to really eclipse some time off the clock, which I think, and again, I don't want to play scared or anything like that, like a kid who's outmatched in Madden or anything like that. But when you have a young quarterback, if you can shorten the game a little bit, I mean, like that, again, I keep going to the Chargers example. The Chargers in both games this year, and I think Braggs and I are kind of like bemoaning the fact that we don't have Harbaugh as our head coach, but it's like, okay, the Chargers have run for more yards than they've passed for more yards. And since Marty Schottenheimer, the Chargers are something like 21-3 when they rush for more yards than pass. And they have Justin Herbert, who's an established NFL veteran who can throw the football. That's what the Bears should be trying to emulate at this point of the game, because if you look at what made Russell Wilson so successful, even Tom Brady in the early part of his career, it was because they were like controlling the ball and playing great defense. And I think that the Bears have half of that right now. And if you committed to it, the offensive line, believe me, would look a lot better if they just kept running the ball downhill. If you had Kari Blasingame and Mercedes Lewis in the game at the same time, like, oh, this now looks a little bit different. And then starting to put other teams' defenses into a defensive position, like I'm tired of this. I'm tired of seeing you guys do this over and over again, because eventually our defense is going to hold. We just have to break their will once, and then the floodgates will open right up.
Yep. I mean, where are you at, Corey? Because this defense is just kind of the kind of bell cow of this team right now. And now you have Anthony Richardson, who week one, I think, was probably the player you highlighted the most coming out. And then in week two, he had a humbling moment in Green Bay of his own, where he couldn't get anything going, couldn't get in the end zone, threw a lot of bad balls, and probably could have thrown a few more interceptions than he actually did. So now they return back to Indianapolis here coming up. When you're just like last week, when you set it up with, your Texans thoughts, what are your thoughts now heading into this Colts game as a whole for the Chicago Bears?
I think number one, you got to stop the run. They're going to try to get that run game established. And when I look at what Anthony Richardson does well, getting outside the pocket, the rush lanes have to be great, because CJ Stroud, right? He can be mobile when you need to, but Gervon Dexter, he had that nice game where he didn't stay outside contained. That's something that you can't do with Richardson. He seems like when he gets outside the pocket, he feels comfortable. He can complete the ball. He can run. So I think the rush lanes are highly critical for this defensive line. Everybody has a job. You got to keep them in that pocket, especially a guy like Richardson. So stop the run, keep him in the pocket, force errant throws, because I think he's going to get the ball out quicker than he wants to, because he wants to get on that move. So if you can keep him in the pocket, I really believe they'll have success with him. But first and foremost, you got to stop the run. It starts with Billings, with Gervon Dexter inside. You got to be able to stop those inside runs and then set the edge, right, with the defensive ends and linebacking core. You really got to set the edge of the defense. I'm looking forward to it, because I think the defense, they are the star of this team right now. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They kept them in that game, still gave them a chance no matter how bad the offense played, like literally 19-13. That's a win all day for the defense, to keep CJ Stroud under 300 yards, a guy that really has torched up some teams. You kept Mixon. I know he was a little banged up, but you kept him at bay when the previous week he went off. It wasn't pretty always, but the defense found a way to get it done. They got off the field when they needed to. It's just such a waste at times. It feels a lot like when AB played and Briggs and myself, like we had these great defenses, and the 1 year, 2012, we start out 7-1, and we end up not making the playoffs at that point, just because offense couldn't get things going. And then the next year, offense gets things going. Basically the same defense, we're dead last in every category. It's like you can't have everything on the same page. And, I said earlier about the panic button. I'm just worried that they're not going to figure this out. It's very concerning when you get, 1 week you're like, okay. But what we saw last night, I think, is very alarming. And I think just from the standpoint, like seeing that game and seeing Shane Waldron and the other offensive personnel, and not change a single thing and make an adjustment. And literally they showed him on the sideline. His arm is shaking while he has his play sheet. I'm like, is he nervous? Like, I don't know what's going on at this point, but it's definitely concerning. Like seeing your quarterback get destroyed in that game and you did nothing to change it at that point. It's almost, it reminded me like when there's a boxing match and your fighter is just getting destroyed and you're like, man, I need to throw in the towel. Like not throw in the towel, but change what you're doing at that point. And I thought he made no adjustments to what was going on. And literally Houston, what they had was every pass rusher's dream. They had a feast out there. They were feasting. They're chomping at the bit to get after him. And you just never want your quarterback to go through that situation. And like I said earlier, it reminded me a lot of that Cleveland game with Justin Fields. And you just don't want to do that to your rookie quarterback, your generational talents development. You don't want to stun it with a performance like that because, yeah, I'm just hoping that he could have a short memory and move on. But it's just definitely concerning that they allowed that to happen in that game.
We're here at CHGO Bears After Dark, getting ready to wrap things up on the night. We do shows every single day. If you're new to the program, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, doesn't matter. Breaking news, pre and post game shows for every single game day. This is what we do here at CHGO Bears. A lot of great coverage for you guys at your disposal. Adam, as we start to wrap this thing up and we look ahead, still a long week to get ready to eyes on the Colts, but at the same time, we kind of want to wash our memory from last night's game. So what are your early thoughts now going into Indianapolis and what the Bears need to do to try to get a win and get back into the over 500 column?
Let me give you a couple of palate cleansers to kind of put this behind you. Some other things that happened over the last couple of days. I played 9 today, and the Shankopotamus came out, and yet I was just, this is over 9. I was just 7 over for shanking as much as I did because my chipping and my recoveries were so good. So don't get into panic mode. Sometimes you got to maintain your confidence and go out. Both of my kids scored goals this weekend in our AYSO adventures. My daughter's team won 0-5. Because we're the road team. You got to understand the home team is first in soccer. Nobody understands this. And then the boys won 4-0. And again, my son scored. So we were feeling very good about that. Arsenal won. They beat Tottenham. So there were some good things. So let's focus on the good things. I do believe with Matt Eberflus going back to Indianapolis, the Matt Eberflus revenge game, this will hopefully be the statement game of where the Bears get loose and they find a way to get things taken care of. As great as Anthony Richardson is, and he can look good at times, like Mike Pittman Jr. has not been a factor at all. Touchdowns have gone to Alec Pierce, and even that one was kind of a gift at the end of the game. Jonathan Taylor, for as good as he's been, is actually, I think his streak, he had a streak of 8 consecutive games, 7 or 8 consecutive games with a touchdown. He's not getting the yardage, though. That's kind of been an issue with them. I know fantasy-wise, he hasn't had a lot of 20-point fantasy games, so that he doesn't feel like he's a great fit with Anthony Richardson, and I don't want him to get it figured out here. But I really do believe that the Bears are going to try something. I wish they would have done it. I wish they would have done it last night. And I know that like the ego gets involved and you don't want to do one of those games where you're sort of turtling and playing, a conservative game and doing Marty ball or trying to emulate what the Chargers are doing. But I hope they get back to a running thing that will eventually at some point open it up for Caleb. Like Caleb will throw for 4,000 yards at some point, but it's got to start with the rushing attack, and it's got to start with a strong offensive line. Probably not going to happen this year, but still establish the run. I think we can do that. And again, with the Rams coming to town the week after that, not to get too far ahead of ourselves. I mean, you were sitting here, Braggs. You're like, hey, I don't know. Am I being greedy for the amount of wins? You thought the Bears were going to win what? 9 games, 8 games, 10 games? What was that? Where were you at?
I have him at 10, and I'm standing strong.
10 wins. And what did you have him starting? Did you have him starting 2-0 or 1-1?
I had him starting 1-1.
We're where we need to be right now. And offensively, it could be a little bit better. And I'm not going to stick my head in the sand and just point to the scoreboard. But at the same time, we can't get too worked up about this. Like that was a good club we were playing. A team with Super Bowl aspirations. One of the teams in the AFC expected to contend with the Kansas City Chiefs to potentially knock them off. I'm okay with it. Like I'm not great with it, but listen, we had a chance, 2 minutes left, opportunity to win the game. Did not happen. A lot of it was because the offensive line was, like, geez Louise, Darnell Wright. Like, how did you, that was one of the cleanest hits I've seen on the quarterback in quite some time. Clean a little bit of that up, and then I think the Bears could be cool. I'm not going to say they're going to win 41-0, but like they should be able to beat this Colts team.
Yeah, well, Matt Nagy's in the chat laughing at me. 10 games. He thinks it's real funny. I'm standing strong on it, Matt. Thank you very much. You somehow found your way into 2 playoff appearances, so anything is possible, sir. The mad scientist that was Matt Nagy. So I got the Bears winning this week. They play the Rams the next week. They play the Panthers. I had them, Adam. 4-1 heading to London. And then the Jaguars game was always kind of a weird game for me because I want them to win so badly because we're making the trip all the way over there. But
is that at Wembley or Tottenham?
At Tottenham again. So the Bears played there once.
I need to send you some Arsenal gear to kind of let them know. See, that's already a good song.
Man, because Tottenham, when we went there in 2019, Tottenham Stadium is in a pretty edgy area. So I don't know if I want to be poking the bear of the locals there.
Listen, my teams are 1-0 at Tottenham Stadium this year, so it's going to be fine.
Let's go.
All right. Well, let's get this thing wrapped up. It's been a long couple days. We were doing post-game shows until 3 a.m. last night. Rank. It was a wild time, but it was a lot of fun. It was a good therapy session here. Greg Hall Art saying AYSO shout out. Used to coach my kids. So there you go.
There's my coach of the year trophy right there.
There you go.
There you go.
143. Girls U6 through U10. That's 3 divisions. Actually, it's 5 divisions. But coach of the year.
Yep, the great coaches of our time: George Hallis, Adam Rank.
That's right. Listen, if the Bears need me, I'm in. I'm ready to go.
Right guard.
Yeah, right guard.
Coach. I might have to go coach.
We're gonna have you play right guard, Corey. I am Skokes. Well, with my knee braces, I kind of look like an offensive lineman right now. I am Skokes. I'm not worried about the record right now. It's about stifling a young quarterback's development and putting him in danger behind that line, and that's something Corey talked a lot about last night on our post-game show. So make sure if you haven't checked out the post-game show to do that, and then also the Briggs and Brown post-game show was really good as well. Those guys were lit up even at the late hours of 2 a.m. Edward with a $10 super chat as we wrap things up. Poles needs to stop being conservative and make a splash with the O-line. The personnel we have will not get it done. Plenty of draft capital and money to spend. Williams will get killed with this line. He certainly was in harm's way in a big way last night. So, all right, boys. Well, that I think wraps things up for tonight. You know, we got your guys.
You have something here. What about the diehards?
No diehards. Only if, well, we can give the diehards a shout out, of course. But typically, because Adam, just to pull you behind the scenes, we're on Roku now, which is really cool. But every show is condensed on Roku to an hour. So even if we go an hour and 30, the Roku show is only an hour. So once we hit the hour mark, which is about to hit, then Roku kind of ends. So we always kind of end with a diehard read as we get to the hour mark, just to kind of put a bow on our Roku viewers. And we appreciate all you guys tuning in on Roku. It is very cool to go on the TV guide. If you have a Roku TV, go down the sports channels, and then there's our channel right there. It's like, hey, look I made it. Hanging out with guys like Corey Wooten, Adam Rank, Lance Briggs, Alex Brown, Adam Hogue, and then I guess we all have to put up with Mark Carmen, who is about to try to win softball championship back-to-back years. So best of luck to them. Thank you to everybody that tuned into the chat. Make sure you hit the like button on your way out. We'll be back tomorrow at noon, breaking down, everything we're hearing from Hallis Hall and everything in between as we continue to turn the page to the Indianapolis Colts. So with that being said, for Corey Wooten and Adam Rank, I'm Greg Braggs Jr. This is CHGO Bears. Keep your head up and always bear down.
We all silly like the mayor.